There is need for reform, but if I was to support the media reforms, then they needed to be very carefully considered and the bills very carefully crafted. But what we've had instead is a very rushed process. I'd go so far as to say it's been shambolic. You've only had to be in the galleries and to see all the carry-on to know that it has been very, very rushed. And it's not the way to approach very important reform and important public policy. And I think because it has been so rushed, we have a number of problems here. We have a number of, I think, very important areas for reform which have not been addressed in the government's bills. For example, what about the need to give members of the community more rights if they're being mistreated by the media? Those sorts of issues. What about the Press Council? What about giving the Press Council authority over print media which aren't members of the council? And at the same time, we've also got things in the bill which continue to be problematic. For example, why on earth do we need to establish a second regulatory agency or mechanism to oversee media mergers and acquisitions when that's exactly what the role of the ACCC is? And if the ACCC doesn't have all of the powers it needs to properly address the public interest dimension of media mergers and acquisitions, well, let's amend their act. We don't need to establish a second costly mechanism. So look, in closing, I think this is a missed opportunity. There is need for media reform in Australia. A great many Australians have, I think, legitimate concerns about, for example, the concentration of media ownership, the behaviour of some media. So this was a really important opportunity to address those concerns and to come up with some really well-considered, carefully thought-out bills that the Parliament was then given all the time it needed to scrutinise, to debate, to go to committees, and at the end of the process we would have had some really good public policy. But now we don't. And who knows whether the government has the numbers. I'll go to questions.
What did you think of Bob Katter's idea of setting up a panel of experts to appoint a commission? Do you think, did that have any merit? Did anybody put it to you? Did you have time to consider that?
Yes, I'm broadly familiar with Bob's proposal, and good on Bob Katter for looking a way through this. But I would add, he's only seeking to address one small part of the reform issue. He's trying to deal with the controversy about the establishment of a public interest media advocate. Even if his suggestion has merit and is progressed, it leaves all of the other issues. And I come back to two very important issues. One is when members of the community are mistreated by the media. It's not a level playing field. They don't have bottomless pockets to take legal action against a newspaper for so on. So I was hoping that, and this is just one example, I was hoping in these reforms we might level the playing field for members of the community. A lot of people are really concerned about the concentration of media ownership. I think News has over 60% at last count. Now that's not something to be dismantled overnight, but people want to know how, over time we might have more diversity and less concentration. Bob's idea, it doesn't go to all of those things. So really, good on Bob for the work he's doing, but as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't solve the overarching problem.
The Greens leader Christine Milne claims that you haven't properly engaged with the negotiations in the process. Is that what are your response to that?
Oh, look, this isn't a time for personal attacks, and Christine's not aware of what engagement I have had.
What did you have with the Prime Minister? Did you negotiate today? Was there any way that you were going to vote for these 4 bills today with any changes?
Oh, absolutely. I met with the Prime Minister yesterday at some length. Today I've met with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Manager of Government Business in the House on 2 occasions. So I've been open-minded. But I had a couple of, and by the way, they've come back to me with some interesting suggestions to address some of my concerns. One of my concerns, which they have refused to address, is that these reforms need to be supported by effective public interest disclosure legislation. Another way of encouraging freedom of speech, freedom of expression in this country. And I was pushing hard for the government to support my public interest disclosure bill, and they've refused to, and that's regrettable. They do have their own bill coming on tomorrow, I believe, but my understanding is that that is deficient.
Was there any sweeteners or anything like that outside of the media reforms that the government offered you to try and get you on side?
No, the government didn't offer me any sweeteners, and nor did I ask.
Christine Milne said that you had to stand up to Rupert Murdoch and pass the changes, trying to put pressure on you, I thought. What's your response to that?
I thought the subtext in that statement was really a personal attack on me, and I think that's regrettable. I think anyone that knows my history, anyone who knows my track record, well knows that I'm not one to buckle in the face of vested interests.
From your perspective, are these reforms dead?
Well, I don't know. That's the government's business. All I know is that there are 4 reforms yet to be decided upon, and I will not vote yes for any of those. You know, if the government wants to go away and come back with a new bill or new reforms and start afresh, I'd look at it afresh.
Mr Wilkie, do you see this issue as tied into the leadership debate within the Labor Party?
I'm going to leave the whole issue of the ALP and its leadership well alone. I have approached this strictly on its merits as a matter of public policy, and when I approach it on its merits, I come to the conclusion that the 4 bills are not worth supporting. If that has knock-on effects, that's for those people to deal with.
The Prime Minister took over the negotiations. If you can't come to another agreement with her, surely it reflects badly on her ability to provide stable leadership and put through her bills.
Yeah, Joe, I'm not going to be drawn on those sorts of matters. The issue for me today was whether or not the 4 remaining media reform bills were worth supporting, and I've come to the conclusion that the process surrounding those 4 bills has been nothing short of shambolic, and that they are deficient in a number of significant areas, and some of the inclusions that are still in them, there are problems with them, and I won't support them.
In what way were they shambolic? Can you talk about when you were first told about what the package was, whether you had any prior consultation at all, whether you had any ability to amend what was put before you?
I did receive a number of briefings from government staff members over a period of months, but I only saw a draft of the bill last week, so I don't believe I've had enough time to properly scrutinise the bill in its final form. So I think it has been very, very rushed. In fairness to the government, only today the Deputy Prime Minister was prepared to look at some amendments to address some of my concerns, and in fact those suggestions did go some way to addressing some concerns, but there are still too many outstanding matters.
Given a lot of the independents have said that they have been critical of the process of these reforms, how do you think the government thought that they could get these through in such a short time frame?
I don't know the answer to your question. You know, when I talk about it being a shambolic process, I would have thought from a public policy point of view and also from a political point of view, these matters would have been dealt with last year. And the fact that in the 6th last sitting week before the anticipated date of the federal election, for us to be having you know, these debates, these media events, defies belief. I would have thought that these issues would have been done and dusted or killed off last year.
Mr Wilkie, you said
sorry, yes.
When was it killed off this morning? You say you met with the Prime Minister yesterday. Was it the decision made today? Was it prior to? Yeah.
Yes. At the time I did an ABC radio interview this morning, I was clearly leaning towards opposing the bills, but I did leave open the possibility of me still supporting them. I advised the Deputy Prime Minister at approximately 1:45 today in his office.
Mr Wilkie, you said you met with the Prime Minister, the Treasurer and the Leader of the House. Did you have many meetings with Senator Conroy?
Yes, I had a very long session with him last week, but obviously...
What about this week?
No, not this week, but there was no need to.
You haven't spoken to him this week?
Only getting off the aeroplane. But this week I've spoken to the Prime Minister, I've spoken to the Deputy Prime Minister on multiple occasions, I've spoken to Anthony Albanese on multiple occasions. There was no shortage of a conversation, and they knew exactly where I stood.